brothers and sisters. It's Greg Farrar with the Catholic Worship Conference. Today we're going to be talking about something that's critically important to us as instrumentalists, and that is the ability to play in tune. So we're going to look at some of the tools that enable us to do that. We're going to talk about some issues that come up with tuning, and then we're going to look at some best practices as it relates to using those tools and our ears in order to make sure that our instrument is in tune as it should be. So we're going to go down the list and talk about some things that will help us to play in tune. But first I want to talk about what causes tuning issues. Well, the first, obviously, as a guitar player, as a bass player, as a flautist or violinist, solo instrumentalist, is that we haven't tuned our instrument. Great thing to do when we get to rehearsal, we pull our instrument out, is go ahead and tune up before we get started in the process of rehearsing. Now, it sounds really like common sense advice, but it's very easy to kind of overlook that step, and then we're going to have to take time later in the ensemble and take time during rehearsal to stop and do that. So right out of the gate, as a best practice, let's pull our instruments out, let's go ahead and put it into the best tune that we can, and then move on with the rehearsal. So what is causing intonation issues within our instrument? Well, as a guitarist and a bass player, our strings are not in tune. It's been, the guitar was bumped on the way to rehearsal, we kind of put it in the car, we pulled it out, and it's been sitting in our living room for 2 or 3 days as we've been rehearsing, getting ready for the weekend, and it's just not in tune. So we can go through the process and make sure that all of our strings are in tune. That's super obvious. As a flautist, as a violinist, same thing. We want to make sure that the instrument is in tune with the tuner before we get rolling. Second thing that can affect intonation on our instrument is how we're attacking the strings. This is something that's less often looked at as an issue, but it does exist, especially when you have larger ensembles and a lot of people attacking their instrument with air or with their hands. It is very easy to take a pitch and with a stronger attack to bend it out of tune. Now that can be something very subtle, but in the context of an ensemble, those little outages can really add up to a big sum of not sounding good, of sounding like things are like the whole ensemble is out of tune. That just simply isn't the case. So we need to make sure that we're attacking the strings and we're not over attacking or over gripping. You'll see this a lot with acoustic guitar players who will occasionally play an electric guitar with much lighter string gauges, and we could be playing an E chord here and bending it almost up to an E and a half, almost an F, and it just doesn't sound fantastic. So make sure our attack on our instruments is sounding great. The last thing, and this is very uncommon as it relates to causing a problem within the ensemble, is the intonation of the instrument actually is out. And what do I mean by that? So you may have a guitarist that always sounds like they're out of tune, and you see them, they're tuning, and they're doing their due diligence and making sure their instrument's in tune, and they're tuning to open strings, your E, your A, and it's registering on a tuner and everything's looking great, but as they're playing and they're up here in the 5th position, or they're up here in the 7th position or higher, it doesn't sound like it's in tune. Now, again, this is a less common problem, but more than likely what's happening is the instrument setup just isn't fantastic. And what do I mean by that? So guitars, when they come from the factory, they are usually in pretty good shape, but it pays to have your instrument set up. And what actually happens during a setup, they get the string heights set up and they get your intonation set up so that when you're playing an E open, it's in tune, and when you're playing a B on the 7th fret, that B is in tune. Bad intonation can really affect that greatly. So you may have someone in your ensemble that has an instrument that just hasn't been set up very well, and that's going to affect the sound as well. Much less common, but it can still be a thing. So let's talk about the tools that we have that enable us to play in tune. My favorite, the first thing to talk about as a guitarist or a bass player, is a floor tuner. Some people call them a stomp tuner. What this enables you to do as you plug your instrument in using an instrument cable, guitar cable, when you stomp on one of these tuners, you'll get an LED indicating that sound has stopped going to the PA. So it'll block sound going to the PA so everyone doesn't have to listen to you tune. And then you have a very bright display, and you can see if you're sharp or flat as you go string by string. This is an older model, Boss TU2. Boss makes fantastic gear. This is an older model. I think I bought it for about $100. 15 years ago, 20 years ago. Now they have a newer model, the TU3. I think it's around the same price, 100, 110 bucks. Great investment to have on your floorboard, on your pedal board, if you're into those, kind of things, or even to have as a standalone pedal. I think these are a must for a number of reasons. It'll allow you, if you're plugged in, if you need to, for whatever reason, unplug your guitar, you don't have to let anyone know that you're going to be unplugging it, from a PA operation perspective. You can stomp on it and unplug your guitar and go do what you need to do. Also, these tend to be more accurate than some of the other tuning options that we're going to look at here in just a minute. The disadvantage to these is if we're using a floor tuner, it's probably at our location where we are going to be playing, whether that's in a choir loft or up front in the music ministry area. So you can't tune remotely without taking your whole pedal board with you. So that is a bit of a disadvantage. There are a lot of companies that make these that are great. Polytune makes one, also about 100 bucks. Fantastic, super reliable. And I just bought an Ibanez for around $50 for one of my acoustic rigs. Love it, super bright, does everything I need it to do. 50 bucks, what a deal. The second kind of tuner we're going to talk about is what we see a lot nowadays. These things are called Snark. Snark is the brand. These attach to the end of the headstock of the guitar. And I like these and I don't like these. So let's talk about what's up with these. Keeping one of these in your case is probably a good idea so that when you get to rehearsal, before rehearsal starts, without having to set up your floorboard, you can put this on, turn it on, tune your strings, be in tune. Make sure you turn the battery off on these guys. Batteries go pretty quick on them. Why do I dislike these? This sounds a bit vain. I don't like the way they look hanging off the end of a guitar. I don't like the way they look. Your guitar manufacturer purpose-built a headstock to look a certain way and built that in also to the sound of the guitar. And I just don't like things hanging off the end of these gorgeous guitars that I see. Old Fenders people are playing. You could have a 78 P bass and you see this guy hanging off the end of it. I just don't dig it. I do like the portability. Again, you can tune in the music room before you step out into the music ministry area, before you step out in the choir loft, so I do like them for that. Also, these are a little less accurate than your floor tuners are going to be. That's what I've found over time, but it is a good, valuable tool to have. They're about 20 bucks, 25 bucks. You can find them on your favorite retailer, Sweetwater, Guitar Center, what have you. So it's a good thing to have. I just don't love the way it looks. All right, so we've talked a lot about tuners for guitar players, bass players. What about our solo instrumentalists? A couple of things. A lot of us are carrying smartphones nowadays. Here's a tuner that runs, I think this one's called iStrobosoft. You can go to the Apple Store, you can go to the Google Play Store, put in tuner. You're going to find something that's going to enable you to see visually. This one's fantastic. You can see it moving faster and slower to pitch. Will enable a flautist or a violinist to get in tune pretty quickly. Other tuning tools. Sometimes we are working with an acoustic piano and it may be a small team. If the piano is not currently in tune, it's very helpful to take an A or play a D minor chord and have everyone tune to the piano. The strongest tool that we have in our arsenal for tuning issues is always going to be our ears. The Snark may show, a floor tuner may show that everything's in tune, but something doesn't sound right. Trust your ears. Let your ears lead you whether or not an instrument is in tune. Use the tuner as a tool to get you 99% of the way there. Let your ear kind of dictate that everything is as it should be. I find consistently especially in using Snarks, that 4 or 5 of the strings will be close and there's one that's just, I don't know if it's an overtone thing, it's just not registering well. Let your ears lead you. Let's talk about some best practices as it relates to tuning. Well, the first we said is a great one. When you arrive for rehearsal, go ahead and put your instrument in tune. Don't wait for your ensemble leader to call out the fact that something just doesn't sound right and they're trying to figure out what it is. Go ahead and put your instrument in tune before rehearsal begins. Now, sometimes temperature shift. Our music room, our choir room can be much warmer than our sanctuary space at times. Sometimes the opposite is true. So sometimes things will shift throughout the course of preparing for Mass and actually being at Mass. Obviously, it makes sense you're going to need to have to tune again, but let's go ahead and tune up and do our due diligence on the front end. In our music area, we are very visible, so I would say this is also what I would call a best practice. We're very visible, so it can be very distracting. We also have a very hard surface kind of church, kind of the granite style floors, pews, so everything rings. So as we are going through the course of playing and tuning, if you need to tune between strings, try to do it at a time where the congregation is also creating some noise. It could be during the creed, it could be during the responses, it could be at the beginning of a song if you don't have a lead-off part in a song. Try not to be tuning in a time where it is like dead space. Please don't tune during the gospel. Please don't tune during the Eucharistic prayer. Try to find a space when you can where maybe the congregation is moving, or again, there's a song that's happening and you can kind of tune. I'm talking about string players now that have a floor tuner or a Snark, and they can tune without affecting the PA. Speaking of which, so if you're a solo instrumentalist and you find you're out of tune, or your ensemble leader is saying you're out of tune, there's no way you're going to tune at Mass without being a huge distraction. You're going to have to step out and go back to the music room or whatever your rehearsal space is and tune up there. Guitar players, this will be one of the last things we talk about. If you're using a floor tuner and have to tune at Mass, try to turn your body in such a manner, two things. Try to turn your body in such a manner that people aren't watching your hand as you're doing it. It's also, if you're playing an acoustic instrument, it's going to project the sound away from your congregation. So try to subtly turn your body. Second thing, if you're tuning with a floor tuner at any point during Mass, you don't need to do it with a pick, with a sharp attack. Bong on the string, a thwack on the string. Take your thumb, you're trying to get the string to resonate. Your thumb, or one finger thumb, works very well. It's very subtle, like a bass player. Get the string to resonate, check out the tuner, bring the string into pitch without attacking it with a pick. Try to be as discreet as possible. These things will help us tremendously as we're working to play in tune within the context of liturgy. Thanks for joining us on this video on how to play in tune within the ensemble. I encourage you to hit like on the bottom of the video, and please hit subscribe so you can stay tuned with our latest posts and all the things happening at the Catholic Worship Conference. Thanks for joining us. Until next time, God bless you.